Good morning, everyone. I'm Alex Johnmeyer. Rachel and Sarah asked me this year if there was anything I've ever wanted to do for the telethon that I hadn't done before, and I was like, well, actually, could I read a children's book? And they were like, yeah, sure, sounds great. So I thought I would share with you one of my favorite stories. This is Frog and Toad Together by Arnold Lobel. And I did not know this when I was little. I just recently found this out that this was Arnold's very first book. And 4 years after he wrote this in 1974, he actually came out to his friends and family as gay. So now as an adult, that brings a whole new spin to Frog and Toad's adventures for me about their friendship and the time that they spent together. So, but I wanted to share this with you. So let's get started. Frog and Toad Together by Arnold Lobel. This first story is my personal favorite. It's called The Garden, and it's the one that I would read to my child whenever she was little. And so let's get started. The Garden on page 18. Here we go. Frog was in his garden. Toad came by.
"What a fine garden you have, Frog," he said.
"Yes," said Frog, "it is very nice, but it was hard work."
"I wish that I had a garden,"
said Toad. "Well, here are some flower seeds. Plant them in the ground," said Frog, "and soon you will have a garden."
"How soon?"
"Quite soon," said Frog. And so, here's what we are at the beginning of the story, sweet little Frog and Toad. Toad ran home. He planted the flower seeds.
"Now seeds, start growing."
Toad walked up and down a few times, but the seeds did not start to grow. Toad put his head close to the ground, and he said loudly,
"Now seeds, start growing."
Toad looked at the ground again. The seeds did not start to grow. That's just unacceptable. Unacceptable. Toad put his head very close to the ground and shouted,
"Now seeds, start growing!"
Frog came running up the path. "What is all this noise?" he asked.
"My seeds will not grow,"
said Toad. "You are shouting too much," said Toad. "These poor seeds are afraid to grow."
"My seeds are afraid to grow?"
asked Toad. "Of course," said Frog. "Leave them alone for a few days. Let the sun shine on them. Let the rain fall on them. And soon your seeds will start to grow." That night, Toad looked out his window.
"Drat," said Toad. "My seeds have not started to grow. They must be afraid of the dark."
Toad went out into his garden with some candles.
"I will read the seeds a story,"
said Toad.
"and then they will not be afraid."
Toad read a long story to his seeds. I wonder what story he was reading to them. What do you think? What story would you read to seeds? Toad, wake up, said Frog. "Look at your garden." Toad looked at his garden. Little green plants were coming up out of the ground. How exciting!
"At last!"
shouted Toad.
"My seeds have stopped being afraid to grow."
"And now you will have a nice garden too," said Frog.
"Yes," said Toad, "but you were right, Frog. It was very, very hard work."
This next story that I wanted to read to you guys is called Dragons and Giants. And what it means, why I love this story, is it's about Frog and Toad facing their fears and choosing to be brave, or maybe pretending to be brave. But that how, for me, as trans and queer people, it takes strength and courage to be visible and to take up space in this world. So, you know, as with everything in my life, maybe I put too much meaning into things, but regardless, it still resonates with me, and so maybe it'll speak to you too. So, you know, go out into the world, be brave. Here we go. There, that's better. Frog and Toad were reading a book together.
The people in this book are brave, said Toad. They fight dragons and giants, and they are never afraid.
I wonder if we are brave, said Frog. Frog and Toad looked into a mirror. We look brave.
Yes. But are we?
Frog and Toad went outside. We can try and climb this mountain, said Frog. And that should tell us if we are brave. Frog went leaping over rocks, and Toad came puffing up behind him. They came to a dark cave. A big snake came out of the cave. Hello, lunch, said the snake. When he saw Frog and Toad, he opened his mouth wide, and Frog and Toad jumped away. Toad was shaking.
I am not afraid.
I would be afraid of a big old snake like that, wouldn't you? They climbed higher, and they heard a loud noise. Many large stones were rolling down the mountain.
It's an avalanche,
Cried Toad, and Frog and Toad jumped away. Frog was trembling. I am not afraid. Run. They came to the top of a mountain. The shadow of a hawk fell over them. Frog and Toad jumped under a rock, and the hawk flew away.
We are not afraid. Oh, they're not afraid.
Screamed Frog and Toad at the same time, and then they ran down the mountain very, very fast. They ran past the place where they saw the avalanche, and they ran past the place where they saw the snake, and they ran all the way to Toad's house. That terrifying, huge hawk. Run, 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 run home. And that's okay. Sometimes we need to run home. We need to be surrounded by the things and the people that we know love us, where we feel safe. And so they were back now at Toad's house.
Frog, I am glad to have a brave friend like you.
He jumped into the bed and pulled the covers up over his head. And I am happy to know a brave person like you, said Frog. And he jumped into the closet and shut the door. And Toad stayed in the bed, and Frog stayed in the closet. And they stayed there for a very long time, just feeling very brave together. The end. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this. I certainly enjoyed reading it to you. So yeah, be sure to stay tuned in to the rest of the telethon. We're going to be picking the winner of my original painting that I was working on for pretty much all of yesterday. So the winner will be announced here very, very soon, momentarily. Thank you so much for spending your morning with me and with all of us here at MTUG. All right, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay warm. Bye.